The girl woke up in the morning to find an unfamiliar African-American man frying eggs in the kitchen. Alarmed, she ran to tell her mother, who calmly responded,
Maybe that's okay. It's Mr. Church, our new cook.
Charlie was confused, not understanding why there was suddenly a chef in their home early in the morning. She was quite resistant to the idea and adamantly refused to eat the breakfast he prepared. On the way to school, she tried to persuade her mother to send the black cook away. What Charlie didn't know was that her mother had been diagnosed with cancer and only had 6 months to live. Mr. Church was the cook of her mother's former boyfriend. Before his passing, he had made a special arrangement. If Mr. Church took care of the mother and daughter for 6 months, he would receive a lifetime salary. When Charlie came home from school, she found that Mr. Church hadn't left. Instead, he had brought a pile of books. What frustrated her even more was that her mother could access these books anytime, but she needed to register on a borrowing card. At dinner, her mother tried to comfort Charlie by presenting her with a borrowing card made by Mr. Church, but Charlie, in her defiance, tore up the card in front of them. At first, she wanted to show her displeasure, acting as if every bite of Mr. Church's food was a torment. But to her surprise, it seemed like Mr. Church had worked magic in the kitchen. The dishes changed every day and were always delicious. Gradually, Charlie realized that perhaps Mr. Church wasn't that bad after all. Whenever he came back from grocery shopping, Mr. Church would see the small figure standing on the balcony. He knew that the once guarded young heart was slowly being enveloped by sunlight. As the days passed, Charlie and Mr. Church became good friends. She even introduced her best friend, Poppy, to him. Mr. Church loved to read, and she would often hear him discussing the plots of books with her mother. Charlie was curious about what kind of stories could be so captivating. That night, after some hesitation, she handed over the mended borrowing card to Mr. Church just before he left. Seeing the glued-together card, he couldn't help but smile. To Charlie's anticipation, he picked out The Three Musketeers from a pile of books for her. It was this book that ignited her passion for reading. From Aesop's Fables to Treasure Island, from Little House on the Prairie to The Old Man and the Sea, Charlie, who once disliked reading, was deeply moved by these heart-touching stories. Time flew by, and 6 years had passed. Charlie had grown into a young adult. For her daughter's sake, her mother had been fighting the disease and miraculously lasted until now. However, the person who once walked countless streets holding her hand could now only lie weakly in bed. Mr. Church, even after his contract ended, chose not to leave and continued to care for the mother and daughter. But over the years, he remained a mystery. Charlie didn't know where he lived, whether he had a family, or what his life was like. When she asked him about it, the always composed Mr. Church showed anger for the first time.
Enough! Don't you know when to back off?
Perhaps sensing his tone was too harsh, he added with a hint of guilt.
You have me from morning until night. And what I do when I leave here is my time. For me.
Tears welled up in Charlie's eyes, reminding her of a child being scolded by their father. The graduation dance was approaching, and Owen, whom she had a crush on, approached her to invite her as his dance partner. This took the somewhat self-conscious Charlie by surprise, and she hesitated to reply. Hearing this, her mother encouraged her to bravely accept the invitation, and Mr. Church even personally sewed a dress for her. On the night of the dance, Charlie, wearing a pink long dress, stepped out of her room, taking both her mother's and Mr. Church's breath away. She looked like an angel in their eyes. Wanting to capture this beautiful moment, they took a photo together, the only one of the three of them. After Owen picked up Charlie for the dance, her mother invited Mr. Church to dance with her. They leaned quietly against each other, seemingly expressing gratitude for his years of silent dedication. The graduation dance was wonderful and romantic, but both Charlie and Owen were a bit shy and reserved, and they just said goodnight when parting. When she returned home, Charlie shared her joy with her mother. The next day after school, seeing Mr. Church outside the bus, Charlie understood that his mother had finally lost her battle with the disease. In the face of death, people react differently. Some try to comfort you, some encourage you to bravely live on, and then there are those who say nothing, just quietly receiving guests and preparing food, just as they've done for the family for years. But when night falls, the always composed man sits outside the corridor, sobbing silently. He handed Charlie an envelope. The money inside was accumulated bit by bit using coupons her mother had given him. He encouraged Charlie to pursue higher education afar and chase her dreams. On the day of their departure, there were no words of farewell between them, just a tight embrace. The next moment, Charlie hurriedly started her car to leave, holding back her tears and not daring to look back. Watching Charlie's receding figure, Mr. Church seemed completely drained. Upon arriving at university, Charlie began a new chapter in her life. She no longer felt the same insecurity she had in high school and quickly blended in with her peers. University life was vibrant and colorful, but the highlight for Charlie was receiving weekly letters from Mr. Church. Time flew by, and as Charlie was about to conclude her university life, an unexpected event disrupted her peace. She was pregnant. Using the address from the letters, she arrived at Mr. Church's new home. Her appearance took Mr. Church by surprise, but more than that, he was elated. Seeing Charlie's prominent belly, Mr. Church didn't ask any questions. Instead, just like before, he set about preparing her favorite dishes. During dinner, Charlie asked Mr. Church if she could stay with him for a while. Without hesitation, he agreed, with the condition that they respect each other's privacy. The two came to an agreement. The days that followed were slow yet heartwarming. For Charlie, being back with Mr. Church felt like coming home. He cared for her as attentively as ever. But Charlie was puzzled by Mr. Church's habit of going out every Wednesday and Saturday night, returning inebriated and mumbling drunkenly. Yet, come morning, he would prepare breakfast as if nothing had happened. One evening, driven by curiosity, Charlie sneaked into Mr. Church's room while he was out. However, he returned unexpectedly and caught her in the act. Charlie tried to explain, but Mr. Church wouldn't listen. In anger, he ushered her out and locked the door. With nowhere to go, Charlie spent the night in her car. The next morning, after buying breakfast from a convenience store, she was knocked down by a teenage skateboarder. Fortunately, passers-by rushed her to the hospital, ensuring both she and her baby were safe. When the doctor inquired about Charlie's family, Mr. Church walked in.
She lives with me.
Not long after, their family welcomed its third member, whom they named Isabel. Watching the adorable baby, Mr. Church's heart was filled with joy. Time passed quickly, and Isabel grew into a lovely little girl. Mr. Church, after much searching, managed to locate Bobby, Charlie's childhood playmate. Dressed lavishly, Poppy seemed affluent. When they met again, she constantly spoke of luxury brands and jewelry, also persuading Charlie to move to the city for a better life, arguing that after all, she couldn't spend her entire life with a chef.
You want to know something about my cook? Richard set aside enough money for Mama to live 6 months. 6 months. And do you know who paid all of our bills, food, and rent all those years after that? Mr. Church didn't work for us. He saved us.
Charlie's words left Bobby deep in thought. Soon after, a remorseful Bobby sent an apology gift containing toys Isabel liked and an expensive pair of earrings. The note read, "You will always be my most precious diamond." One night, Mr. Church returned home severely intoxicated, but this time, he passed out. Fortunately, Charlie found him and helped him into bed, where he mumbled his way to sleep. The next morning, Charlie went to the kitchen as usual, but Mr. Church wasn't there. She found him weakly lying in bed. In that moment, realization dawned on her. She softly told Mr. Church to rest and started preparing breakfast. Having observed Mr. Church's culinary skills for years, when she touched the kitchen tools, everything felt surprisingly natural. Time passed swiftly, and the aging Mr. Church couldn't stop coughing. Charlie took him to the hospital for a checkup. Perhaps it was fate, but she unexpectedly encountered Owen there. Once the most handsome boy, he was now the most handsome doctor. The two strolled through the brightly lit streets, reminiscing about the past and discussing Isabel's father. She mentioned that it was just a foolish night, but it gave her the most wonderful gift. Time seemed to stand still, but Mr. Church's health continued to decline. One day, Mr. Church told Isabel a story. He spoke of a young boy who was afraid of many things except ladybugs. One day, while chasing a ladybug, the boy grew into a man. The ladybug led him to a small house inhabited by a gentle woman and her daughter. Apologizing for his intrusion and preparing to leave, the woman said, "Stay with us. We may not have much, but we'll share everything with you." The man stayed because, for the first time, he felt safe and unafraid. And he promised if he ever saw that ladybug again, he was gonna thank her.
Dating?
Not yet.
Perhaps in the intertwining of our bonds, it's hard to distinguish between giving and receiving. But some nights, we eat the meals you've prepared, touch every key on the piano, and listen to every story from our books. In those immeasurable acts of kindness and generosity, through the lonely years and sorrowful times, we find a reason to look forward and the courage to look back. That night, as usual, Charlie read books aloud to Mr. Church. This time, he asked her to stay, not wanting to be alone in the dark. Holding his hand tightly, he closed his eyes, his face calm. At the funeral, an uninvited African-American man named Jerry appeared, revealing himself as the owner of the bar. It turned out Mr. Church was merely the pianist there, his performances captivating and mesmerizing to many. The bar owner only then discovered Mr. Church was also a culinary expert. He wasn't mysterious, just someone who respected boundaries and needed his own space. The next morning, Charlie was awakened by the familiar sounds of jazz music. When she reached the kitchen, her face broke into a relieved smile. Love, it seems, is about nourishing others and fulfilling oneself. It's infectious, it's a legacy, and it's eternal. Mr. Church, directed by Bruce Beresford, released in 2016, it's not the typical love story, but love and warmth are embedded within. Like a gentle moonbeam, it pierces through, reaching deep into our hearts. For those of you who enjoyed this film, feel free to check out the full-length version. There are many nuanced details worth savoring. This is Movie Review, and we'll see you in our next video.